The morning sun peeked through the towering skyscrapers of Chicago as a young boy rushed through the busy streets, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. 25 years ago, that same boy would wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, not to deliver newspapers like some might assume, but to help his grandmother prepare meals for her small catering business. Life wasn't easy in South Chicago. Their apartment was small, with peeling wallpaper and a heater that worked only when it wanted to. But what they lacked in material wealth, they made up for in determination and dreams. His grandmother, a woman with silver-streaked hair and hands rough from years of hard work, had always told him, "Baby, your mind is the most powerful tool you've got. Nobody can take that away from you." He took those words to heart. While other kids played basketball after school, he spent hours in the public library, devouring books about business, technology, and success stories. The librarian, Mrs. Wilson, would often save interesting articles about entrepreneurs and CEOs for him. "You're going to be somebody special," she'd say, sliding another magazine across her desk. His high school teachers noticed his potential too. When he scored top marks in math and science, they encouraged him to apply to top universities. But it was his economics teacher, Mr. Chen, who changed everything. After class one day, he handed over a Harvard Business School brochure. "I see something in you," Mr. Chen said, "something rare. You don't just understand numbers, you understand people." Getting into Harvard wasn't just challenging, it seemed impossible. The application fees alone were more than his grandmother's weekly earnings. But the community rallied around him. The local church held fundraisers. His grandmother's catering clients wrote recommendation letters. Even the grumpy owner of the corner store contributed what he could. Harvard Business School was like stepping into another world. The hallways were filled with students from privileged backgrounds, wearing expensive watches and talking about summer homes. But instead of feeling intimidated, he felt motivated. His unique perspective, understanding both the corporate boardroom and the struggling community, became his greatest strength. He worked harder than anyone else. While his classmates went to parties, he took extra courses and worked part-time at a consulting firm. His professors started noticing. One day, after a particularly impressive class presentation, Professor Thompson pulled him aside. "You have something special," she said. "You don't just see problems, you see solutions that others miss." Graduation day was the proudest moment of his life. Watching his grandmother in the audience, tears streaming down her face as he received his diploma, made every struggle worth it. But he knew this was just the beginning. His rise through the corporate world was meteoric. Starting as an analyst at Sterling Technologies, he quickly proved himself by finding innovative solutions to complex problems. He didn't just crunch numbers, he understood the human impact of every business decision. When other executives saw expenses, he saw opportunities for community growth. Within 10 years, he became the youngest vice president of operations in the company's history. His office, perched high above the city streets, was bigger than his childhood apartment. But success hadn't changed his core values. Every month, he still visited his old neighborhood, mentoring kids who reminded him of himself. His grandmother's words still guided him. "Success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right." He lived by these words, treating everyone, from the janitor to the CEO, with the same respect. His colleagues often wondered how someone so successful could remain so grounded. But now, standing outside the boardroom door, straightening his tie and checking his presentation one last time, he had no idea that his biggest challenge lay ahead. The quarterly board meeting was about to begin, and what would unfold in the next hour would test everything he had learned on his journey from the streets of South Chicago to the corporate heights of success. The morning of the quarterly board meeting felt different. There was electricity in the air as employees rushed through Sterling Technologies' gleaming headquarters, their shoes clicking against the marble floors. Word had spread about the young VP's upcoming presentation, and even the usually stoic security guard gave him an encouraging nod as he walked through the lobby. In his office on the 47th floor, he stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city wake up below. The presentation materials were ready. He checked them for the 100th time. This wasn't just another corporate proposal. This was his vision for changing how big businesses could lift up communities while staying profitable. His secretary knocked softly on the door. "They're starting to arrive," she said with a warm smile. "And don't worry, you've got this." She'd been with the company for 30 years and had seen countless executives come and go. But there was something different about this one, a genuine desire to make a difference that went beyond just climbing the corporate ladder. The sustainability initiative had been his passion project for months. Late nights, missed weekends, countless cups of coffee, everything had led to this moment. The project wasn't just about reducing the company's carbon footprint, it was about creating jobs in neighborhoods like the one he grew up in. He personally visited community centers, talked to local leaders, and designed a program that would give people real opportunities, not just empty promises. As he gathered his materials, he thought about the young people he'd met during his research. The single mother working 3 jobs to put her kids through school. The talented teenager who couldn't afford college but had brilliant ideas about solar energy. His project would change their lives. The numbers were solid. The company would save millions while creating lasting positive impact. The boardroom was an imposing space, with its dark wood panels and wall of windows overlooking the city. Family photos of board members lined one wall, generations of business success staring down at anyone who dared to present new ideas. He'd been in this room dozens of times, but today felt different. Today, he wasn't just presenting numbers, he was presenting possibility. As board members filed in, he noticed the subtle dynamics at play. The old guard sat together, their expensive watches glinting under the lights. The newer members, more diverse in age and background, took their usual seats on the opposite side. Then he noticed something unusual. Mr. Richardson, the senior board member known for his harsh criticisms, was shuffling through papers with unusual intensity. The chairman called the meeting to order, his voice echoing off the walls. The usual updates went by quickly: quarterly reports, market analysis, competitor reviews. Then came the moment he'd been waiting for. "Next up," the chairman announced, "our VP of Operations will present a new sustainability initiative." Standing at the front of the room, he felt confident. The presentation was solid, the research thorough, the projections conservative yet impressive. As he clicked to the first slide, he caught a glimpse of Mr. Richardson whispering to another board member, both of them smirking. Something didn't feel right. The first few minutes went smoothly. He outlined the current challenges: rising operational costs, community relations, environmental impact. The board seemed engaged, nodding along as he shared initial findings. But then he noticed Mr. Richardson typing furiously on his laptop, an unusual break from his typically dismissive body language. Just as he was about to reveal the innovative core of his proposal, the part that would transform both the company and struggling communities, Mr. Richardson cleared his throat. That small sound carried warning signs that something was about to go very wrong. The room's atmosphere shifted subtly. Some board members straightened in their chairs, others leaned back, as if preparing for a show they'd been anticipating. The chairman's expression changed too, a mix of concern and resignation, like he knew what was coming but was powerless to stop it. In that moment, standing before the most powerful people in the company, he felt a familiar feeling from his childhood, when you know you're walking into a situation that's been set up against you. But just as his grandmother had taught him, sometimes the biggest sit-ups lead to the most important breakthroughs. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and continued with his presentation. Whatever was coming, he was ready. After all, every major achievement in his life had come after facing seemingly impossible obstacles. What he didn't know was that the next few minutes would not only test his preparation, but would challenge everything he'd worked for in his career. 20 minutes into the presentation, everything changed. The young VP was just explaining how the sustainability initiative would create job training programs in low-income areas when Mr. Richardson's hand shot up. Without waiting to be acknowledged, he stood up, his expensive suit creasing at the shoulders as he leaned forward with a predatory smile. "Before we go any further," Mr. Richardson's voice carried a note of calculated disdain, "I think the board needs to consider some important context." He pressed a button on his laptop, and suddenly the presentation screen changed. There, projected for everyone to see, was a grainy photograph of a rundown neighborhood in South Chicago. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Some board members shifted in their leather chairs, while others stared intently at their notepads, avoiding eye contact. The young VP stood perfectly still, his presentation clicker held tight in his hand, as Mr. Richardson continued his carefully planned attack. This, Mr. Richardson gestured to the image, is where our ambitious VP comes from. He clicked through more photos. The small apartment building with its peeling paint, the busy street corner where his grandmother's catering business had started, even a picture of him as a teenager helping at the local community center. I have to question, Mr. Richardson's voice dripped with false concern, whether someone from this background truly understands the complexities of corporate sustainability at our level. After all, we're talking about millions of dollars here, not a neighborhood bake sale. A few muffled laughs echoed from the corner where Mr. Richardson's allies sat. The chairman looked uncomfortable but remained silent, his fingers drumming lightly on the polished table. The younger board members appeared shocked, their faces a mix of disbelief and embarrassment at witnessing such a blatant display of prejudice. But Mr. Richardson wasn't finished. He pulled up financial records from the scholarship fund that had helped pay for Harvard Business School. Some might call it impressive to rise from such humble beginnings, he said, his voice thick with sarcasm. I call it concerning. Can someone who needed charity to attend business school really be trusted with a multi-million-dollar corporate initiative? The young VP felt the weight of every eye in the room. His heart pounded, but his grandmother's words echoed in his mind. When they go low, you go high, but make sure you bring a ladder. He noticed his hands were steady as he reached for his water glass, taking a slow, deliberate sip while Mr. Richardson continued his tirade. Furthermore, Mr. Richardson was now pacing the room like a prosecutor in court. I've done some digging into this community investment idea. Isn't it convenient that many of these proposed programs would benefit the exact neighborhood you came from? One might question where your true loyalties lie, with Sterling Technologies or with your old community. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. A younger board member started to speak up in protest, but Mr. Richardson silenced her with a sharp glance. The room had become his stage, and he was determined to finish his performance. I mean no disrespect, Mr. Richardson said, though his tone suggested otherwise, but Sterling Technologies is a Fortune 500 company, not a charity organization. We need leaders who understand our world, our values, our way of doing things. Not someone trying to turn our boardroom into a social experiment. He clicked through more slides, childhood photos, old newspaper clippings about the neighborhood, even a picture of the grandmother's catering van. Each image was meant to emphasize difference, to mark the young VP as an outsider. But with each click, something unexpected was happening in the room. The young VP remained standing, his posture straight, his expression calm. He hadn't tried to interrupt or defend himself. Instead, he watched as Mr. Richardson's attack began to have an unintended effect. Some board members were now looking at the photos with different eyes, seeing not shame, but strength, not disadvantage, but determination. The silence in the room grew heavier as Mr. Richardson finally ran out of ammunition. He sat down, clearly satisfied with himself, expecting to see a broken man at the front of the room. Instead, he found himself facing someone who seemed to have grown taller, stronger in the face of the attack. The young VP took one more sip of water, set down his glass, and picked up his presentation clicker. His voice, when he finally spoke, was steady and clear. Thank you, Mr. Richardson, for that thorough introduction to my background. Now, if you will allow me, I'd like to show you exactly why that background makes me the perfect person to lead this initiative. Time seemed to slow down in the boardroom as the young VP stood there, facing the aftermath of Mr. Richardson's attack. The air conditioning hummed softly overhead, papers rustled as board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and somewhere in the distance, a phone rang unanswered. But in his mind, he heard his grandmother's voice as clearly as if she was standing beside him. Sometimes, baby, the best response to hatred is to shine even brighter. He walked slowly to his briefcase, every step measured and deliberate. The board members watched, some expecting him to gather his things and leave in defeat. Instead, he pulled out a worn leather folder, one his grandmother had given him when he first started at Sterling Technologies. This old thing has seen me through every important moment, she'd said. It'll hold whatever you need it to. Before I address Mr. Richardson's concerns about my background, he began, his voice steady and clear, I'd like to share something with all of you. His fingers moved confidently across his laptop, pulling up a new set of documents that weren't part of his original presentation. Years of preparation had led to this moment, though he hadn't known it until now. The first slide appeared on the screen. A simple graph showing Sterling Technologies' profit margins over the past 30 years. "This is familiar to everyone here," he said. "It's the growth we're all proud of." Heads nodded around the table. This was comfortable territory for them. Then he clicked to the next slide. But here's something we don't usually look at. The new graph overlaid the first, showing the declining economic health of the communities where Sterling operated. While our profits went up, the neighborhoods around our facilities got poorer. "We've been successful, yes, but at what cost?" Mr. Richardson started to interrupt, but the young VP held up his hand with such quiet authority that even the senior board member fell silent. "Mr. Richardson was kind enough to show you where I come from. Now let me show you why that matters." He clicked through a series of images, not the rundown buildings Mr. Richardson had shown, but pictures of community gardens sprouting from vacant lots, small businesses operating out of renovated storefronts, and young people in job training programs. These are all initiatives started by people from my old neighborhood, people who had nothing but made something anyway. People who understand that true sustainability isn't just about profits, it's about building something that lasts. The room was completely silent now. Even the chairman had stopped drumming his fingers on the table. The young VP moved to stand directly in front of Mr. Richardson, his posture straight but not confrontational. "You asked if someone from my background could understand corporate sustainability. Well, let me tell you what my background taught me." He clicked to another slide, this one showing a complex web of community connections. When you grow up with little, you learn that everything is connected. One person's success lifts up their whole family. One business creates opportunities for dozens more. One good idea can transform an entire neighborhood. His voice grew stronger, filled with passionate conviction but never anger. "My grandmother ran her catering business from our kitchen, yes, but do you know what else she did? She employed 5 other women from our building. She helped 3 of them start their own businesses. She taught me that true success isn't just about making money, it's about making a difference." Walking back to the front of the room, he pulled up the detailed financial projections for his sustainability initiative. "Now let me show you how we can apply these lessons to Sterling Technologies, not as charity, Mr. Richardson, but as smart business." The numbers began to fill the screen: cost savings from reduced waste, increased efficiency from local supply chains, tax benefits from community investment, projected revenue from new markets they'd open up. But more than just numbers, he showed them faces, potential employees, partners, customers, all waiting for an opportunity to prove their worth. "You see," he continued, his voice now carrying a quiet strength that filled the room, "growing up in that neighborhood didn't just teach me about struggle. It taught me about solutions. About seeing opportunities where others see problems. About building bridges instead of walls." He turned to face the entire board, his eyes meeting each person's gaze. "You asked about my loyalty. I'm loyal to success, real, lasting success. The kind that builds up communities instead of depleting them. The kind that creates opportunities instead of just profits. The kind that makes us not just a wealthy company, but a valuable one." The presentation clicker felt warm in his hand as he prepared to show them his final slides. "Now, if you'll allow me, I'd like to show you exactly how we can make that happen." He paused, looking directly at Mr. Richardson. "Unless, of course, there are any other aspects of my childhood you'd like to discuss first." The subtle challenge in his voice was unmistakable, but so was the invitation, an invitation to be part of something bigger than themselves, something that could transform not just the company, but the very way business was done. The next few minutes in that boardroom would be remembered as a masterclass in turning the tables. The young VP's fingers moved swiftly across his laptop, bringing up a series of documents that made several board members sit up straighter in their chairs. These weren't just any numbers, they were Sterling Technologies' own statistics, but viewed through a completely different lens. "Let's talk about talent," he began, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "Over the past 3 decades, Sterling has hired over 5,000 graduates from top universities." The screen showed an impressive graph of recruitment statistics. "But here's what we never discuss." He clicked to the next slide, revealing a startling pattern of turnover. 70% of these hires left within 5 years, taking their training and experience to our competitors. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. These weren't numbers they liked to highlight in their annual reports. But he wasn't done. Now look at our employees who came from non-traditional backgrounds, people who worked their way up through the company. Another graph appeared, showing significantly higher retention rates and loyalty scores. These employees, he continued, stay with us an average of 12 years longer. They file more patents, suggest more cost-saving measures, and consistently receive higher customer satisfaction ratings. Why? Because they understand something that can't be taught in any business school: the value of opportunity. He moved around the table slowly, making eye contact with each board member. But here's what really caught my attention. The next slide showed a map of the city, with Sterling's various offices and facilities highlighted. In 30 years, we've opened 15 new offices, but the communities around these offices have seen an average 40% decline in local businesses. The chairman leaned forward, his brow furrowed. This wasn't information they typically tracked. The young VP continued, his voice growing more passionate, but never losing its professional edge. We've been so focused on growing up, he gestured to the towering skyscrapers visible through the windows, that we forgot to grow out. Then came the slides that made even Mr. Richardson stop smirking. Detailed analysis showed how Sterling's traditional hiring practices had actually cost them millions in overlooked talent, missed market opportunities, and community goodwill. But it wasn't just criticism. Each problem was paired with a solution, backed by solid data and real-world examples. "Remember the community center in my old neighborhood?" he asked, referencing one of the photos Mr. Richardson had shown earlier. Last year, they ran a coding bootcamp on a shoestring budget. 12 of their graduates now work for our competitors, developing software we could have benefited from. The room grew quieter with each revelation. He showed them statistics about untapped markets in underserved communities, potential partnerships with local businesses, and innovative solutions coming from unexpected places. These aren't just feelings or theories, he emphasized. This is business sense. One particularly powerful slide showed the cost of Sterling's high turnover rates among traditional hires compared to the loyalty and innovation rates of employees from diverse backgrounds. "We're not just missing out on talent," he explained. "We're actively pushing it away." But what really captured the board's attention was his analysis of their competitors. Companies that had embraced similar initiatives to what he was proposing had seen their market share grow by an average of 23% over 5 years. "While we've been protecting our traditional way of doing things," he said, looking pointedly at Mr. Richardson, "others have been innovating and growing." The presentation shifted to success stories, other companies that had invested in community development and seen remarkable returns. These aren't charity cases, he emphasized. These are smart business decisions that created value for everyone involved. He saved his most powerful revelation for last. "Remember that charity scholarship Mr. Richardson mentioned?" He pulled up the statistics of past scholarship recipients who had worked at Sterling. Their combined contributions to the company's bottom line through patents, innovations, and cost-saving initiatives had generated returns that were 50 times the original investment. "You see," he said, his voice carrying both warmth and conviction, "my background isn't a liability, it's one of Sterling's greatest assets. Because I don't just see numbers on a spreadsheet, I see the human potential behind them. I see opportunities where others see obstacles. And most importantly, I see how doing good business and doing good in the world don't have to be separate things." The room had transformed. Where there had been skepticism, there was now interest. Where there had been dismissal, there was now engagement. Even those who had been smirking earlier were now taking notes. But he wasn't finished yet. This revelation was just the foundation for what would come next. The young VP took a deep breath, knowing that what came next would either make or break everything he'd worked for. The boardroom remained silent, the earlier hostility replaced by genuine curiosity. Even the city beyond the windows seemed to pause, waiting to hear what would come next. "What I'm about to show you," he began, his voice clear and confident, "isn't just a sustainability initiative. It's a complete reimagining of how a modern corporation can thrive while lifting up the communities it serves." He clicked to a new slide, revealing a comprehensive plan that made several board members lean forward in their seats. The first part of his solution focused on education. We're going to partner with local high schools and community colleges, he explained, walking around the table. But not just with donations, with real investment. The screen showed plans for technology labs, mentorship programs, and paid internships. Think about it, we spend millions recruiting talent from across the country, while incredible potential sits untapped in our own backyard. He clicked to the next slide, showing an innovative apprenticeship program. Every department in Sterling will open spots for local apprentices. They'll learn on the job, contribute fresh perspectives, and grow with the company. His eyes met Mr. Richardson's. And before you worry about quality, let me show you the pilot program results. The numbers were impressive. Apprentices had already identified cost-saving measures worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Their fresh perspectives had led to 3 patent applications, and their connection to local communities had opened up new market opportunities nobody had considered before. But he wasn't done. The next part of his plan addressed supplier diversity. We currently spend billions on supplies and services, he noted. Imagine if even 20% of that went to local businesses. The screen filled with projections showing how this shift would actually save money while building a more resilient supply chain. Here's the beautiful part, he continued, enthusiasm evident in his voice. When we invest in local suppliers, they grow. When they grow, they hire more people. When more people have jobs, they become our customers. It's not just good karma, it's good business. The environmental aspects of his plan were equally innovative. We're not just going green to look good, he explained. We're going to transform our facilities into community assets. The presentation showed plans for rooftop gardens that would supply the company cafeterias, solar panels that would power both the building and surrounding neighborhoods, and waste reduction programs that would save millions. Then came the part that made even the most skeptical board members sit up straighter, the financial projections. By implementing these changes gradually over 3 years, he explained, we'll see our initial investment returned within 18 months. The numbers were conservative but compelling: reduced turnover costs, increased innovation, tax benefits, and growing market share in previously untapped communities. But here's what really makes this special, he said, pulling up a slide that showed the ripple effects. For every dollar we invest in these programs, the community sees $4 of economic benefit. That means more customers, more talent, and more opportunities for growth. He clicked to a map showing potential expansion sites. Instead of running from struggling neighborhoods, we're going to help rebuild them. Not out of charity, but because it's where our next big opportunities lie. The screen filled with demographics showing untapped markets and unused talent pools. The worker training program was particularly innovative. We're not just going to teach people how to do jobs, he explained. We're going to teach them how to create jobs. The plan included entrepreneurship training, small business incubators, and microloans for promising startups. Think about it, he said, gesturing to the city skyline. Every successful business out there started with someone who saw an opportunity and had the support to pursue it. We can be that support while building our own success story. The final part of his presentation addressed corporate culture. We're not just changing what we do, he emphasized. We're changing how we think about success. The screen showed a new metric system that balanced profit with community impact, employee satisfaction, and environmental sustainability. This isn't about lowering our standards, he said firmly. It's about raising them. It's about understanding that true success isn't just about quarterly profits, it's about building something that lasts. As he wrapped up the solution phase, he pulled up one final slide, a simple photo of his old neighborhood. Every community has potential, he said softly. Every person has value. When we recognize that, when we invest in that, we don't just change lives, we change the future of our business. The room was silent again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the silence of discomfort or dismissal. This was the silence of people seeing possibilities they'd never considered before. The young VP stood quietly, letting his words and his vision sink in. He knew the next few minutes would determine not just his future, but the future of countless others who were waiting for their chance to shine. The boardroom remained silent for what felt like an eternity. The young VP stood perfectly still, watching as decades of corporate thinking battled with the undeniable logic of his presentation. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city, touching both gleaming skyscrapers and humble neighborhoods alike. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. "I've been on this board for 25 years, he began, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "In all that time, I've never seen a presentation quite like this." He paused, looking around the room. "I'd also never seen numbers this compelling." One by one, board members began to speak up. A woman who had been quietly taking notes throughout the presentation raised her hand. "The risk assessment is thorough," she noted, flipping through her papers. "And the potential returns, they're conservative but impressive." Even Mr. Richardson seemed to have undergone a transformation. The smugness had vanished from his face, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "I have questions," he said slowly, "but I can't deny the thoroughness of this analysis." The young VP watched as the conversation in the room shifted. Board members who had barely acknowledged each other before were now engaged in excited discussion about possibilities. They weren't just talking about profits anymore. They were talking about legacy, about meaning, about real change. "Let's put it to a vote," the chairman announced, his voice cutting through the chatter. One by one, hands went up. The motion passed unanimously. But what happened next was even more remarkable. Mr. Richardson stood up. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking directly at the young VP. "I thought your background was a liability. I was wrong. It's precisely what this company needs right now." The transformation didn't stop in the boardroom. Over the next few years, Sterling Technologies became a case study in corporate evolution. The apprenticeship program exceeded all expectations. Within 6 months, they had received over 1,000 applications. Young people who had never imagined themselves in corporate offices were bringing fresh perspectives and innovative solutions. Local businesses that became suppliers grew rapidly, hiring more people and expanding their operations. The community centers that had once struggled for funding were now bustling with activity, offering training programs that created a pipeline of talented, motivated employees. The rooftop gardens became a symbol of the company's transformation. Employees from all levels would work there during lunch breaks, growing food for local food banks while building relationships that crossed traditional corporate boundaries. The senior vice president could often be found working alongside entry-level apprentices, sharing stories and ideas. The young VP's grandmother came to visit one day. Standing in the lobby of Sterling Technologies, she saw photographs of community initiatives displayed prominently alongside the company's financial achievements. "You didn't just climb the ladder," she said, wiping away tears. "You built a bigger one." The impact rippled out beyond Sterling. Other companies began to take notice. The same board members who had once scoffed at the idea of community investment were now giving presentations at business conferences, sharing their success story. The young VP was invited to speak at universities, not just about business strategy, but about the power of bringing your whole self, your background, your experiences, your perspective to everything you do. 5 years after that fateful board meeting, Sterling Technologies was featured in major business magazines. But the headlines weren't just about their record profits. They were about the thousands of lives changed, the communities transformed, and the new model of corporate success they had created. The young boy, who once helped his grandmother with her catering business, had grown into a leader who changed not just a company, but an entire way of thinking about business. His office still displayed that worn leather folder his grandmother had given him, now holding new plans for even bigger changes. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation was the simplest one. Every morning, as employees walked into Sterling Technologies, they passed by a small plaque in the lobby. It read, "Success isn't about where you come from. It's about where we're all going together."